For more than 47 years, our nonprofit, Resources for Seniors, has supported older adults and caregivers in Wake County. We can help in many different ways, including adult daycare programs, ramps and repairs, in-home supports, and consultation and referrals. Indeed, we're who to call when you're not sure who to call. Resources for Seniors stands ready to support you in your caregiving journey.
I'm Mark Costley, the founding attorney of Clarity Legal Group, the Triangle Area estate planning and elder law firm. You know those people who become overwhelmed dealing with the multiple challenges of being a caregiver? Clarity Legal Group helps people establish legal tools that avoid confusion, give them peace of mind, give them asset protection, and in some cases help them qualify for Medicaid. We help people get it right in the face of some of life's most important challenges. We don't just provide wills, trusts, and powers of attorney. We provide solutions and ongoing support. We provide clarity and peace of mind. It would be a privilege to help you.
Are you like 80% of seniors who would like to age in your current home? Call Wisdom Senior Care. Are you currently taking care of a loved one and finding yourself frustrated, tired, and even lonely? Call Wisdom Senior Care. Always available, dependable, and flexible. Come partner with Wisdom Senior Care, keeping wisdom at home. So we're going to spend some time talking about peace for the holidays. And I've done this session off and on for a while with the idea that holidays are complicated, dementia is complicated. When we put two complicated things together, it never makes things simpler. Putting something complicated with something complicated makes it harder. So I've done these kinds of conversations, done these at support groups, and other kinds of conferences, but we are now doing Peace for the Holidays COVID-19 style, because COVID changes everything. So when we start to layer in that idea of a pandemic on top of dementia, on top of holidays, we are going to be dealing with something that we need to engage, to educate, and to empower to make our way through it. So complicated. You see me hear me use that word fairly often. I love that word because complicated is just complicated. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's worse. It doesn't mean I should or I shouldn't or I would or I wouldn't. It just means this is complicated. Now, many of you may recognize this orange moving into yellow kind of font that is up there, color that's up there, as something I've typically represented by brain failure, but it just seemed to work for this idea of holidays and complicated. So for some of you, you're going, I can't do holidays. For those of you who can't do holidays, do what you need to do during this time. Find something that builds you up, that lifts you up. For some of you who just can't take it on right now, let it go. Don't feel like you shoulda, woulda, coulda. Let it go, because holidays are complicated. And when we add in dementia, something that's complicated gets even more complicated. So with dementia, we're dealing with four pieces. We're dealing with what's happening to the brain in a structural way. What's happening to the brain in a chemical way. What we're thinking about as far as type of dementia, and really what we're thinking about with what level of dementia is this person at. So let's talk about each of those just very briefly. The truth is I probably have spent an hour or two talking about any one of these. We're not going to have that hour or two. Take a deep breath. We're only going to have this little bit of time. But we are going to talk a little bit about the structural changes that happen in the brains of people who are living with dementia. Now, the structural changes, they're a one-way street. So the damage that happens to the brain because of dementia is just a continuous, ongoing loss. So you start here, you wind up here. And generally speaking, what we notice for most type of dementia, especially for Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common type of dementia, what we notice is those changes happen from complicated to simple. So things that are hard to do become lost. before things that are simpler. So those changes from complicated to simple. So that's generally speaking what happens with the structural changes. So those changes happen in things like memory. So the hardest thing about memory is getting new stuff in. The easiest thing about memory, or the second kind of thing, is things that have already been stored. And the easiest things about memory are emotional memories and procedural memories, muscle memory. So that's what changes with memory. With communication, we move from harder things, understanding complex things like abstractions and humor. We move into understanding things that are just very simple, that are very things you can see and hear and understand, particularly if you've got a visual prompt with them. Then we move into really recognizing, understanding your name. As far as using language, we move from really being able to express what we want and need down to the point where we can get out there is a need, but maybe not specifically what it is in a way that other people really get that there's a need. And then we move down to just sounds. With the frontal lobe function, we move the same pattern. With vision, we move that same pattern. So it's not an on-off switch. You got it, you don't. It's a slow, progressive kind of change. This is why the holidays often are alarming for people, because maybe I compare what Mom was able to do at Thanksgiving last year with what Mom can do at Thanksgiving this year. And I noticed something that didn't seem to be a big deal. When I compare it to last year, this is looking really different. So those structural changes start to show up when we look at them over time. But the chemical changes make that not quite as reliable and predictable, because the chemical changes, they fluctuate. Ultimately, they're fluctuating in a downward path, but as we're getting there, we're having some fluctuations. These chemical changes, they can respond to what's going on in the environment. They respond to the situation. That's why a lot of times people living with dementia seem like they can do things in certain situations and they can't in others. So, for example, the person goes to see the doctor or the nurse practitioner or the PA, and at home the person can't find 2 forks. And in that office setting, all of a sudden the person can count backwards from 100 by 7s. And you're going, I want that. It can change with those chemical reactions, can change with a new person. And so a care facility calls and says, your person isn't doing very well, they won't eat. And the family member walks in and the person says, I'm starving, have you got it? It's that chemical thing. It looks like if that person would concentrate, if she would just pay attention, she would be able to do it, because she can do it when the family's here, and then when it's just us, she goes back. I want the mom my siblings have. I want the dad my siblings have. I want the spouse our children get to see. But because these chemical changes are spiraling downward, but are having these peaks and valleys, it looks like that person could do better if they would just concentrate, if they would just try, if they would just pay attention. She or he could do this, but that's part of the disease. They can't make those adaptations. And so those chemicals may respond to a moment of stress, and the person may either be able to do really, really well, or the opposite may happen. They can't do things they used to be able to do. So we go to someone else's house for the holidays, and Mom used to be able to do these kinds of things, and now at her daughter-in-law and son's house, it's not happening anymore. So it can cause these kind of challenges and difficulties. Type of dementia makes a difference as well. So if I go in to spend time with my person with dementia, all I know about is Alzheimer's disease, and I walk in and my first interaction is, well, you sure have gotten fat. That doesn't feel like Alzheimer's disease. That feels like mean. But for some types of dementia, particularly like frontal temporal lobe dementia, the issue is not memory, it's this impulse control. It's this ability to filter. So you may see things that you don't expect to see. And then the level of dementia, the gem state. So these kind of, go this way, changes happen with loss. But there are fluctuations that depend on, kind of associated with these chemical kinds of pieces, kind of associated with what's going on in the environment, kind of associated with how we're trying to help. And so sometimes people can do things, and sometimes they can't even do what they used to be able to do, just used to be being yesterday be able to do, or this morning be able to do. So these fluctuations make dementia unpredictable. And one of the things that makes life complicated is when life becomes unpredictable. So when life becomes unpredictable because of dementia or because of something else, it makes it hard. And then holidays. Holidays are complicated because when we think about the holidays, we start by thinking about the way things used to be. And we either look at them in an all wonderful or an all horrible way. So we look at the way things used to be as, we had perfect holidays, everything was absolutely wonderful. Or we look and we say, it was chaos, somebody's going to get drunk, we're going to get in an argument. So it's through this vision of the past, what used to happen, whether it's something we want to hold on to or something we regret and dread. We also look at holidays from the idea of expectations. And somewhere, somebody decided that holidays were supposed to be this. And so the expectations that we see in the media and the expectations that come through that we give each other, and when we start to compare, and I bring up social media a lot because we put a certain self of ourself on social media, and people start to see, well, that's what it looks like there. I want that. And life isn't really like that. So our expectations of ourselves, our expectations of what the moment is going to be like, how we're all going to be, becomes a real challenge. Then we're thinking about things like for many holidays, there is this spiritual component that it means, yes, there's all of this, but it's also supposed to be more than this. It's supposed to be bigger than this. It's supposed to be meaningful and deep and important, and cultural kinds of expectations and meanings of this means our connection to our past. It's a heavy load to carry around the past, to carry around expectations, to carry around cultural and religious kinds of meetings, and to add in there relationships as they exist currently and as they've existed through the years. Holidays get complicated. And now, let's add on COVID. So we had holidays, we had dementia, we've got all we can deal with. Now let's throw something else that's unpredictable into that. So we've got the physical impact of COVID. We've got the physical impact of people being sick and people changing and people dying. We've got the physical impact of having to watch for things like fevers. And every time anybody goes, I'm going to do this, and I'm in a room where there are 4 people in here wearing masks watching me, if I go, every one of them is going to go, throw stones at me. So there's this physical impact of anybody with a cough, it becomes really challenging, really scary. We've also got, with COVID, this idea of social distancing, which means for many people, holidays are when we reach out to be close. It's when physically and emotionally and spiritually and socially we're close. And now we're trying to be close without being close. So now we're trying to be close, but at 2 arms length, or maybe even more, and mask and visors sometimes. It changes the interactions. It changes the way we see each other. It changes the way we hear each other. Because if I'm social distancing and I've got a mask on, it becomes much harder to really hear and understand what I'm saying when what you're hearing and understanding and saying is through a mask. It just changes. And for many older people, the mask impacts their ability to understand what you're saying, because many older people have hearing changes, part of the disease, part of aging, not part of dementia, part of getting older. So particularly they're losing the higher pitch sounds. So particularly women's voices, particularly women's voices who are really excited because I was singing, and it becomes like something only dogs can hear. So they can't really hear those higher pitch sounds. They're having trouble hearing because there's so much competition. Second, first age-related changing is ability to hear higher pitch sounds. Second age-related hearing change is the ability to filter out what all of the things that are going on in this dining room, all the things that are going on in this faith meeting, all of the things that are going on, filtering out what am I really supposed to be paying attention to? What is really meaningful for me? So filtering through all of that, and to compensate for those changes, many older people actually have unconsciously started lip reading. And so they put together what they hear with the lip reading, and they can keep up, and they can kind of understand, and they can know that this person is talking to them, and they can respond to my facial expressions. And so maybe they don't get the words, but they get that it's a good thing. So they smile and they nod and go, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So they can kind of get it. But when we mask, we take away a lot of that. So now what I'm saying is actually harder for you to hear, and you can't see my lips moving, and you've lost a lot of emotion. So what I just said is when my mouth is covered, you lose a lot of what I'm saying because it's muffled. You lose a lot of my facial expressions, and you lose the ability to read my lips. So that social distancing through the masking really makes an impact on how we stay in relationship with the other, particularly during holidays when things are more complicated. Things that become more interesting with COVID are things like interpretations. Sorry, I had trouble seeing that on the screen. Interpretations of what are the rules. And so if one family is managing social isolation in this way, another family is managing social isolation in this other way, it can begin to butt heads and can begin to cause conflict. And some people say, we just aren't going to do it this year. And some people say, we should do it like we've always done it. And some people say, maybe there's something in between there that we can make it work. And then it moves back into relationships. So if I am the older sister, which I happen to be, but I'm not the bossy older sister, but if I'm the bossy older sister and I say, well, we're all going to do it the way we've always done it, that may be enough to just set people off. I'm not going to come at all. Instead of having this ability to kind of mediate, to kind of have the conversations that are hard when times are easy, but having conversations that are hard when times are hard makes it, what's our theme? Complicated. So when we put together the holidays and dementia and COVID-19, we don't know what to expect. We can't control it. None of us have the power, the ability to expect, to predict, to really know what's going to happen. But we know certain things are going to make things not go well, and we know certain things put us in a better situation to be successful. And by successful, I mean where people get what they need through these very, very important times of tradition. Through these very, very meaningful, precious moments that we have together to share and to explore and to be together. We can do something really, really beautiful, or we can do something that we wind up paying for quite a long time to come. And hopefully as we begin to explore the idea of how do we find these three components within these traditions. So how do we connect family and faith or culture and festivities in a way that builds something that is the holiday that we look back on and say, remember the COVID holiday? Wasn't that wonderful? Instead of, you remember the COVID holiday? We didn't get to do anything. We want to build it into a memory that we all can embrace and hold on to. Is it going to be different? Yes. Is it going to be complicated? Yes. Is it still going to be something that we can build joy in? And I'm also going to say, yeah, but it's going to take some thought and some intent in how we approach and we manage these ideas. So, peace. Peace. So peace is what we want for our families, for ourselves as individuals, for our relationships, for our community. We want peace. And by peace, I'm talking about we want to prioritize, we want to empathize, we want to adjust, to capture, and to enjoy. So just look at those words together, and you'll notice that they spell out peace. Prioritize, empathize, adjust, capture, enjoy. So let's start to look at each of those individually. So the idea of prioritizing. We've said that it's going to be different. We've said it's going to be complicated. So if it's going to be different and complicated, if we really think through what of this do we really want, what has the most meaning? What has the most value? What is the most important? So when you think back to what are the family traditions? What did we do at this particular holiday? We'll use Thanksgiving. What were your family traditions at holidays? Now, I'm going to encourage you to back up and think, not just what do we do, but why do we do this? Where did it come from? Because I'm going to mention that there is, for some of you, the possibility that some of the things you do, you don't do because they bring you joy, or you don't do because they're the way you believe in your heart and spirit. You do them because it's what you do. So there's an old story, and the old story says that there was a woman who got married and was cooking Sunday dinner for her new family. And she had a ham, and the in-laws were coming, her family was coming, big event, big holiday, and her family tradition for the holidays was to have a ham. So she took the ham, and she cut off one end of it, and she cut off the other end of it, and she stuck it in the pan and stuck it in the oven. Well, her new husband looked at her and said, so what's happening with the ham? And she said, well, you cut the ends off of the ham when you put it in the oven. And he said, well, my family doesn't do that. I've never seen anybody cut the ends off the ham before they put it in the oven. And I don't know why you did that. And she said, well, I did it because my mother did it. So, okay, well, we're starting some new family traditions here. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on. So at the family dinner, the daughter turns to the mother and says, Mom, how's the ham? And her mom said, oh, the ham is perfect. It's tender and it's juicy. It is the most perfect ham. You did a beautiful job. And the daughter said, thank you so much. And I used your secret. And the mom said, what secret are you talking about? She said, I cut the ends off the ham. And her mom said, well, I do always cut the ends off the ham. And I'm glad that you carried on that tradition. And the daughter looked at her mom and she said, so Mom, why do we cut the ends off the ham? And her mom said, we just do that. That's what our family does. We cut the ends off the ham. So there's just kind of looking around the table. Grandma's sitting there. So they turn to Grandma. Grandma's been eating the ham, enjoying the ham. Everybody's happy. So they turn to Mom. They get Grandma's attention. They say, Grandma, so why do we cut the ends off the ham? And Grandma replies, to make it fit in the pan. And so the family tradition that became precious and valuable of cutting the ends off the ham came because a very functional kind of thing. The ham was too big for the pot, so you cut the ends off. So many of these family traditions are things that we do not because they're valuable, because they're meaningful, because they're touching and important, but many of these family traditions are just habits. Now, there's some habits that we need to embrace. There's some habits we need to hold on to. There's a whole thing about making positive life changes in your lifestyle choices that has to do with making habits, connecting this with this. So every time I get in the car, I use hand sanitizer, whether I'm coming from wherever. Every time I do brush my teeth, I do squats while I'm doing brush my teeth. Connecting habits. Habits are wonderful. I'm not saying don't do habits. I'm saying let's be thoughtful about which of these are important, which of these are meaningful, which one of these do we really want to hold on to, which of these are we going to embrace and really continue. So if the most important thing is that we're all together, let's build from that and let go of some of the other pieces. If the most important thing is that we do it on the day, let's build from that and let go of some of the other pieces. So which is we really holding on to because they're valuable and meaning, and which are just kind of habits. So then we have to take it another step. Those are important for all of us in COVID. Then we have to step back and take another step. And the other step becomes when we're thinking about the person living with dementia, what traditions are most important to them? And so are they these recent traditions, the things that we've developed over the last 2 years, 5 years, since the person moved from the farm to live in the condo, those traditions, is it the recent traditions, is it the traditions from when the person was a young adult and then were raising their young children? Or is it the traditions that were part of my childhood memories? My memories about being a little kid and waking up on the morning of the holiday and having these expectations of what was going to happen next. And then specifically, which pieces of those? So if the memory was waking up, was it being in the place, or was it the other people who were there? Was it what happened next, or was it the situation? So pulling out what are our priorities, and then we start from our priorities, then we can begin to build. So not everything is as valuable, not everything is important, and when we prioritize, these are the pieces that we as a family really hold precious. These are the pieces that that really make Thanksgiving. Then we start moving on to empathizing with the person living with dementia of what would this be, what is this experience like for them now? In this particular type of dementia, with this particular where they are in the progression of their dementia, in this particular situation with where they've had structural changes, where they are in their chemical changes, what does it look like, feel like, seem like for that person living with dementia? Does it look really beautiful? If I've never seen this before, if I walk into a home that's decorated for a holiday and I've never seen this before, do I look at this home and say, oh, this is beautiful, this is a place I want to be? Or do I walk into this place and say, this is a place where I have been? Or do I walk into this place and say, I don't want to touch anything because I'm afraid I'll mess it up? Or do I walk in and, ooh, it's too much. It's overwhelming. There's music and there's sparkling lights and there are all these little children and it's just too much. And I'm glad y'all like it, but I have had enough. Enough for me. So we start to think about what would it look like through the eyes and the ears and the brains of people living with dementia. We're looking at a lot of change. And if you heard my previous session, change is not a gift for people living with dementia. Change doesn't come well. So we're thinking about changes in routine. So if I usually eat dinner at 5 o'clock, but our holiday family dinner is at 7, at 5 o'clock, I'm ready for dinner. Fine if y'all want to wait till 7, but if you make me wait for 7, somebody's going to pay for it. And it might be everybody's going to pay for it. So those changes in routine, not so good. So what of the routines can we hold on to empathize with what it's like for this person living with dementia? What are the changes in environment? So if I usually walk in a room and I sit in this chair and it's here and I look out that window, that's important for me. But now if there's a tree, there's not supposed to be a tree in my house, and now there's a tree where my chair is supposed to be. I can't sit in the chair. This is not working for me. I don't like it. I don't need it. I don't want it. Changes in hearing, and we've kind of talked about those a bit already, that people lose the higher pitch, the more excited, lose when there's a lot of competition for what you're supposed to be paying attention to. So you walk into a room and there's a lot of stuff to process, and there's a lot of stuff to process visually. So we think about changes of aging and vision. We think about things like loss of ability, some acuity, so some ability to really see, but also with aging, not with dementia, but with aging, there are changes in ability to perceive color. So certain colors stay. So colors like red and orange and yellow are kind of protected. So I can still see red and orange and yellow pretty well. Colors like blues and greens and violets tend to fade out a little bit. So I walk into the room and the thing that I can see is the color, and it can become really, really uncomfortable because things are getting my attention that I may not have really noticed before because of the yellowing of the lens of the eye. Also, what changes with vision, just as aging, is peripheral vision. And so whereas typically if you put your hands all the way out, look straight forward and wiggle your fingers, you can see your fingers if you're under age 25. If you're on my side of age 25, you have to start moving them forward a little bit to be able to really see your fingers. So it begins to narrow down. That vision changes, it narrows down a little bit. So what happens is people start to have car accidents. They don't run into the back of the person in front of them because that is central vision. They see the person in front of them. They start to have trouble changing lanes, or they have trouble turning into the driveway. So they turn in and they take out the mailbox, or they take out the fire hydrant. So they start to have this narrowing of the peripheral vision. So when we're thinking about people living with dementia, we have even more changes than we associate just with the aging changes. So we're narrowing down to the point that we're actually looking at the world through, but not like through like a scuba mask. So I'm only seeing this. So what that means is if someone is standing right here and they're talking to me and it's kind of noisy, I don't realize that they're talking to me because what I'm seeing is what's right in front of me. I don't see that person standing over here. So when that person leans over to give me a hug, I react and I try to protect myself and I go, go, and maybe I push them away. And it's not because I don't like them or because I've never forgiven my sister for stealing my favorite earrings when we were in elementary school. It's because I didn't see that person because of my visual changes. It gets worse. It goes down to binocular vision. So put on your binoculars, look around your room, and what that means is now my vision has narrowed not just side to side, but top to bottom. So what happens is I am looking at the person at the table across from me, and we're having a conversation, and there's food on my plate, but if I have this vision, I don't see my food because I'm looking at the person I'm talking with. So everybody's been eating. I haven't eaten because I'm having conversation. I'm socializing. I'm enjoying it. Everything is really good. People think, oh, she wasn't hungry. She didn't want to eat. No, it wasn't that she wasn't hungry. It wasn't that she didn't want to eat. It's that she didn't see that food. So those changes make a big difference. Later on, it actually comes down to people don't see in 2D. They only see in 1D. So they can only see in 2 dimensions. And so we start worrying about things like people being able to walk up and down steps because they don't see steps as steps. I walk up, I don't see this banister as a banister, and so I fall over it head over heels. So the potential for injury in a new environment becomes really dramatic. And the ability for me to process everything that's going on when what I'm only seeing is this much of it gets to be really complicated. There's that word again, complicated. So these visual changes, if we don't pay attention to them, if we don't use them as an opportunity to really empathize with what is this, we think it's wonderful, what is it really like for this person living with dementia? What are they getting out of this experience? The next letter we're going to talk about is adjust. So this is where the hard work comes because, we've talked about priorities. We've talked about being in that. Now we've really got to kind of say we are going to do something different this year. So we're going to pull together our team, always include people. Well, not always. There's, some changes for everybody. But, generally speaking, include as many people as possible because people are part of a solution. They're more likely to embrace and claim it. So how can we modify it or simplifying? So maybe what we want to change is the time. So often for people living with dementia, there are times of the days when things go better and times of the day when things are more complicated. So there might be some times when often it's in the morning that things really go well, and then by the afternoon, things are not working so well. So thinking about changing that time to make it work. So maybe we're used to having a big dinner at 7 o'clock. Now with COVID, we've got to add in a whole nother layer of how many people can we have together. So now maybe the best time is in the morning, but we can't have everybody in the morning. We've got to spread it out. So if we're going to spread it out, who do we want to come in the morning? Do we want the people who might be the most complicated, or do we want to, and so it becomes this whole negotiation, modification, simplification of how do we make this work with holidays, with COVID, and with dementia. We're going to have to make some changes. So we've made a plan. We have decided that we're going to have one family come at a time and do cleaning in between. And I'm not recommending this. I'm just giving this as an example. We're going to have something at breakfast, something at lunch, or we're not going to do meals. We're going to have something between breakfast and lunch, and we're going to have something between lunch and dinner, and then we're going to have something in the late, the early evening. We're going to do that. So then we're having people come at different times, and one family comes, and one family comes, and one family comes. So it's different. We're not all together, but we've seen everybody. We've got a plan. Yay, we are good to go. And guess what's going to happen more than likely to your plan? Unless you are different from everybody else I've ever worked with these kinds of plans, there's going to be a glitch. It's kind of like any family reunion, any conference you've ever gone to, any wedding you've ever gone to. Something happens that is not what you expected. Something's going to happen that's not what you're expecting. And when that something starts to happen that is not what you expected, that's when you're going to start watching for signs of distress. Because when you want to adapt, when you want to make your change, is when you start to notice that things are not going so well. So for people living with dementia, that might be a physical restlessness. That might be the person getting really kind of fidgety almost, getting a little kind of restless, getting a little fidgety, moving around a little bit more. And that might be a sign the person is tired and they actually need time to rest. It might be you notice that their voice gets higher pitched and they're talking more. Well, I'm glad y'all came, but when are y'all leaving? Well, y'all, isn't it about time for y'all? Don't they need to go? So you start to see those signs of distress. Some of them can be really blatant. Some of them can be much more subtle. Sometimes it's the opposite of what we expect. We expect people to get really restless, and what we find is the person gets kind of quiet, and the person starts to kind of withdraw. And now this person, instead of being, really at a high level of distress and restless, this person is just really kind of. And it might look like, we're getting by with it, but that can be a sign that it's building. And when it builds up to a point, help, they put me here and they won't let me, can build up to that sign. So watch for either the physical kind of distressed or the not doing, the either doing a lot or the not doing, talking a lot, not talking. Watch for those and be prepared. You've already got in your schedule, you've got some time to recover. You've got something to do hard and then some time to recover. Do something challenging, some time to recover. You've already got a plan in there for some time to recover. Add in some time to recover in the moment. So when that person needs something to relax and recover, we've got a plan for that. Now, here's something to remember. Relaxing and recovering is not the same as waiting. There is a difference between relaxing and waiting, because often with people living with dementia, what we do when we want them to relax and recover is we want them to go here and be quiet and wait. And very few of them. I teach thousands of people. Nobody has ever come to me and said, you know what I find really relaxing? I like to wait. That's what really helps me relax, is waiting. Give me a good line, and I just am good to go for another 3 hours. It's not really what people like. It's not really what helps. And so take a deep breath and be prepared to find a quiet place with something to do that helps the person relax and recover. And in time of COVID, that might be a little different, because maybe what the person really needs is to be with someone close. So then we find a way for somebody to be with someone close, but we find it so they're looking out and not at each other. Because if I'm looking at the person, there's more of a chance of exposure than if we're looking parallel. So maybe what we do is we go outside. We can do this in the holidays in North Carolina. We go outside and we sit on the rocking chairs. And so we've got some distance between us. We're doing something together. The rhythm just kind of helps everybody kind of relax and cover. Here's a secret. My secret for conflict is try to have conflicting discussions that have a lot of conflict in a rocking chair, because it's really, really, really hard to hold a good mad when you're in a rocking chair. It's just hard to hold on to a good mad when you're sitting in a rocking chair. So make those adjustments. The next one is capture. And plus minus in these days that everybody has a cell phone, and everybody's cell phone does everything. We can record photographs, we can record video, we can do everything from our phones. That actually is really beautiful when it comes to these moments with people living with dementia. Back before this, when we're using film, or before digital especially, but film, it was, you all got together and you sat there and the picture was something that was very static. This in-the-moment way of capturing gives us the opportunity to really explore and express the spontaneous moments. So encourage reminiscence. Start the reminiscence with the phrase, I remember. And that's important. I remember the Christmas that Matthew came home when he was a baby. And I remember you bought him this little See and Say that he kicked the whole time. So I start the reminiscence with I remember, than do you remember what you bought Matthew for his first Christmas? Because that do you remember puts me in a situation, puts the person living with dementia in the situation where they can get it wrong or they can get it right. When I'm talking about I remembers, it's not a place to get it wrong or to get it right. It's a place to be together and to share. I remember, and then that will move into more I remembers, and the person can share their remembrance. Take a deep breath. It is more important to be connected than it is to get the details right. So if someone makes a mistake, and that really wasn't this grandchild's birthday, it really was this one, we can figure that out in how we pass it on. But it's the stories and it's the moments that are valuable and precious. So record those. Record those moments that are multi-generational. Record the person's voice. So the other nice thing about phones is they kind of are, a little incognito. They're kind of a little disguised. So it's not setting up a big camera, setting up, blah, blah, blah. It can be very natural. People don't change. And so you can find those beautiful, beautiful moments. Even better if you integrate some family props. So maybe those are photographs, or maybe it's a special kind of food that only comes out on this holiday, or maybe it's a special decoration, or maybe it's a blanket or maybe it's a use some props to kind of bring forth those stories so they can come out and they can be stored so we can have them for years and years and years to come. So the second E of peace stands for enjoy. So you've done all of this work. You've made all these plans. You've got all these adjustments. You've given away some things that you really wish you hadn't had to give away, but it's for the best. You've made this priorities. You've done all of these things. You're taking all these pictures. All these things to do. So there's a classic story about two sisters, Mary and Martha, and they had company. And Martha was making sure everything in the kitchen was going well, and she was working, and she was making sure everything was going the way it was supposed to. And Mary was sitting with the guest and listening and being with the guest. And Martha came in and said, to the guest, well, you should tell her to get off her lazy butt and come help me. I've got a lot of work to do. And the guest said, she's doing what she needs to do. She's being with me, and my time is short. I think that's a real strong lesson for those of us today in holidays, but in COVID, is to find that joy in the present, that even when it's not like it used to be, to still find the magic, to still find that connection, to let go of the shoulda, woulda, couldas, to let go of some of those expectations, to let go of some of the ways it used to be, and find some joy in this moment. It's not the way it used to be. Find some joy in this moment. And we can only do that by letting go of the way it used to be and finding some ways to embrace the way it is. Not giving up, not saying, oh, we're not celebrating this year. Finding ways to really go through those pieces of prioritizing, of empathizing, of adjusting, of capturing. And then you've done all that work. Find that time, make that commitment to being there, to not being the one who manages everything, the one who does everything, but make the commitment to really being there, being part of it, being part of the memories, be in some of the photographs. Maybe you don't love the way you look in photographs. Be there because you're part of the moment. And for all of us, finding the ways in COVID, finding the ways in holidays to keep those critical routines without losing the uniqueness of the holiday. So finding the way that maybe the important bookmarks of the day are getting up in the morning and having the usual breakfast, and then we can tolerate something being different that's holiday themed and related, but then we've got to get back on track, but then we can do something different, but then we've got to get back on track. So at night, we're not dealing with high distress. We've got people who can have had a wonderful day, but still be okay to go to bed. So find that routine. So I call it flexible structure. So find your flexible structure. Another thing that's really easy for me to stand here and say is let go of being right, that we've always done it this way, therefore it's right, or I like it this way, so therefore it's right. We don't always have to cut the ends off the ham. Sometimes we can just let go and go with the flow and think and decide, including the feelings and emotions, because it's not fair to say, oh, just let them ventilate and get rid of the emotions, then we'll get down to work. Those feelings and emotions bring important work with them. So really talking about, I feel this loss, and it would feel better if we did this, so how do we integrate these pieces in? For COVID-19, it's not going to be the same. But it never is. This conference, there's going to be something in this conference, I'm predicting the future, that's not going to be what anybody expected, but that would be happening if we were in person as well. It's not going to be the same, but it's never the same. It's not going to be the way we remembered, but it's never the way we remembered. So bringing this focus into, we're going to have our family. We're going to have the festivities, the relationships. We're going to have the faith, the spiritual, the cultural pieces. And we're going to make some memories that we're going to hold on to. And we're going to look back at this. I tell my son, he's just came home from his freshman year at UNC. It was a very short semester. He had one class. You will have memories of the COVID years. So make some memories that aren't just loss, but are also some things to really celebrate. We've talked a lot about the changes of COVID and the changes of dementia and the changes of the holidays from the perspective of it's complicated. If you're in a place in your life, and if you've got COVID and you've got dementia and you've got holidays, many of you are grieving. You're grieving the loss of real people. You're grieving the loss of routines and connection. You're grieving the loss of being able to do things spontaneously. You're grieving the changes that you're seeing that appear to have been escalated because of social distancing. Holidays are hard. So be patient with yourself. If you do what you need to do for yourself, to not just survive, but to really grow and to thrive. And you do that by understanding, what do I need to do to be okay? Do I need to sneak off for a minute? So I've got a visual connection with my sister that when I go, she knows to switch out with me. And it's her turn to come in and to deal with all of these people. And I go outside and I sit in that swing. Do what's right for you. Find the support in those rituals. Find those support in those people who are connected with you, those people who love you. But mostly realize that it's going to be a process to feel the feelings, to experience the experiences. Give yourself permission to, we always say, give yourself permission to cry. I'm going to say, give yourself permission. But I'm also going to say, give yourself permission to be grumpy. If you're grieving and you're grumpy, give yourself permission to warn people. See, I'm feeling really prickly. I'm grieving. I need to be grumpy. And let go of the expectations for yourself. Let go of the expectations for dementia and the person living with dementia. Let go of the expectations of everything's going to be horrible because of COVID, or we're just going to ignore COVID, and find a way to build some peace into this holiday season for 2020, because it's the only one we're going to get for 2020. Let's build some meaning, build some joy, build some connection. Thank you so much for being part of this really important virtual conference, and I look forward to hearing about your holidays.